Grandpa died in 1960, full of years and honors, albeit honors from the Rotary and Kiwanis and Lions Club and the Moose Lodge, and as per, befits a good cardior. But my family we owe everything to the American car. I mean, without the car, we couldn't read, didn't have food and stuff, so our history begins with the beginning of the American car. And by now, some O'Rourke's some of us have even gone to college. I mean, we didn't go far at college, do very well there, but we went. So I take the demise of the American car. I take this personally. I'm looking around for somebody to blame. I'm mad. I want to blame somebody like Ralph Nader. What fun it would be to jump on Ralph Nader with both feet, and send the pink Marxist goo squirting out of his cracked egghead, And I think we should definitely do that, even though Ralph is 75 and clearly insane. But it took more than one man and his ignorant and ill-written book, Unsafe at Any Speed, to wreck the most important industry in the nation. And, that was the Corvair that Ralph was attacking at Unsafe at Any Speed, the Corvair. And Ralph was just wrong about the Corvair, because my high school girlfriend, Connie, she had a Corvair. And Connie was the worst driver in the world, and one of the fastest. And if Connie couldn't get herself killed in the Corvair, it couldn't be done. So Ralph was all wrong. But the pundits are all telling us that there's plenty of blame to go around for the death of the American car, and I'm not really sure about that either. Now it's true that the car executives are knuckleheads, but all executives are knuckleheads. Look at Bill Gates. Now, if you were worth $1 gazillion, wouldn't you go to a barber college and get a decent $5 haircut? Come on, Labor union leadership, it's maddening. But it's one thing to be mad at the labor union leaders, and it's another thing to have expected those labor union leaders to be down at the UAW hall standing on a chair yelling, "We demand less money from the bosses." That was just not going to happen, Car workers make $600 an hour, or so I'm told, But, they get laid off every time a camel farts at an OPEC meeting, Maybe their pay is too high, but it's not like they're getting that pay, So no, I think to understand what doomed the American automobile, we have to give up on economics, and we have to turn to melodrama, See, politicians, journalists, financial analysts, all the purveyors of the banal, they've been looking at cars as if a convertible were a business. It ain't. Fire the MBAs, hire a poet. The fate of Detroit is not a matter of financial crisis, of foreign competition, corporate greed, union intransigence, energy costs, or measuring the shoe size of the footprint in the carbon, It's a tragic romance. It's about unleashed passions, titanic clashes, lost love, and wild horses, especially wild horses. Because you cannot understand the automobile unless you understand horses. 100 years ago, Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem called The Ballad of the King's Jest. And in The Ballad of the King's Jest, Kipling has this Afghan tribesman, very up to date. Kipling was always ahead of the curve on the current events, poetry subjects. So an Afghan tribesman says, "4 things greater than all things are women and horses and power and war." Now, if you insert another power after the horse, in that verse was as true in the suburbs of my boyhood as it ever was up in the Khyber Pass. Horsepower. Horsepower is not a quaint leftover of linguistics or some sort of vague metaphoric anachronism. James Watt, the father of the steam engine, progenitor of the entire Industrial Revolution, he didn't have a term. He lacked a measurement. He lacked a measurement for the movement of weight over distance in time, what we would call for short energy. And what we would call energy, this was not even an intellectual concept in the late 18th century. Imagine living in a world where energy isn't even an intellectual concept, And so Watt started from scratch, and he did all this research using draft animals, and he found out that under optimum conditions, a big draft horse could lift 33,000 pounds, 1 foot off the ground in 1 minute. Now, Watt because the Watt that was named after Watt hadn't been named yet, didn't have a name for this. So he called it, quite logically, 1 horsepower. And incidentally, 1 horsepower is equal to 746 watts. Thus, your supposedly thrifty Prius could illuminate much of LA, causing enough harmful light pollution to offset the detrimental global warming that you prevented by not buying an Escalade. By 1970, a Pontiac GTO, may the brand name rest in peace, had horsepower to the number of 370. In the time of 1 minute, for the space of 1 foot, that GTO could move 12,210,000 pounds. And it could move those pounds down every foot of every mile of all the roads to the ends of the earth for every minute of every hour until the driver nodded off at the wheel. 40 years ago, the pimply kid down the block, using $3,500 in saved up soda jerking money, he procured might and main beyond the wildest dreams of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, whose hordes went forth to pillage, mounted upon less oomph than is in a modern leaf blower. Now, Genghis Khan and the pimply kid, they were just looking for a date, basically, because that's horses, horsepower, all the same thing. It's all about being cool. It's all about being cool, all about looking cool. A knight in ancient Rome, the aristocrat in ancient Rome, was simply called in Latin equestrian, a guy on a horse. That's all it means. Cavalier means the same thing. Chevalier means the same thing. If cavalier, if you lose the capital letter on the front of cavalier, the dictionary says insouciant and debonair, marked by a lofty disregard of others' interests, rights, and feelings, high-handed, arrogant, and supercilious. And how cool is that, Then there are cowboys, always cool, in the U.S. cavalry, the coolie comes to the cowboy's rescue, plus the proverbially cool man on horseback to whom we turn in troubled times. I think one reason it's impossible to take anything seriously that the government's been doing in this whole fiscal crisis, let alone in the car industry, one of the reasons it's impossible for me to keep a straight face about this is just the mental picture of Barney Frank astride a prancing horse, in the Lone Ranger manner. Can you see it? Hi-ho, executive compensation and away, Ain't happening, Early witnesses to the automobile urged the motorists to get a horse. But that, in effect, was what the automobile would do. It would get a horse for everybody. Once the Model T was introduced, we all became Sir Lancelot. We all gained a seat at the round table. We were privileged to joust for the favors of fair maidens at drive-in movies, the pride and the prestige of a noble mount was vouchsafed to the common man. And vouchsafed to the common woman, too, because no one ever tried to get the ladies to drive side saddle with both legs hanging out the car door. No, Now, a car is not necessarily cheaper than a horse. It's just cheaper than a horse you'd want, See, at about the same time that Henry Ford, I looked this up, about the same time Henry Ford when he was peddling Model Ts for $780. That was the initial price of the Model T. The price would actually go down over the years, but the original price for Model T in 1908 was $780. At that same time, there was a yearling filly named Scepter, an untried racehorse, admittedly from a very good bloodline, but it had never been raced, sold at Newmarket outside London for 10,000 guineas. 10,000 guineas versus $780. Now, 10,000 guineas, a guinea is a pound plus a shilling. If you convert 10,000 guineas into current American dollars, let's just say that if Rick Wagoner, the fired GM chief, if Rick Wagoner had been the stud hoss that sired Scepter, that 10,000 guinea, if Rick Wagoner had been that stud horse, GM would have been telling the Obama White House to go get some new management, is what would have happened.